To be honest, one of the most important things today is that tomorrow's a big day. You've got elections, primary elections, and there may be no primary election more important to Donald Trump and in general than the one that's taking place in Kentucky. More money has been spent on this race than any other House primary in history, and it'll likely be the best test yet over whether Trump's hold over the Republican Party remains absolutely solid despite his overall approval rating hitting a second-term low. So of course, I'm talking about the election to determine whether Representative Thomas Massie, a man that Trump has described as a pathetic loser, a sick wacko, and a moron, wins the Republican nomination for Kentucky's 4th district. Because really, whoever wins this primary, they're going to win re-election come November since the district is so solidly red. So if Massie wins, he gets to continue being essentially a radical Republican, which means that he breaks from the president on things like releasing the Epstein files. Because Massie and a handful of Republicans, including former Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, committed the sin of wanting to get those files out, even though that was a thing that the Trump coalition campaigned on. But of course, if Massie loses, there's going to be one less Republican in office willing to stand up to the president on certain key issues. And with that, of course, we have to mention that Massie is definitely not the first target of Trump's campaign to eradicate dissent within the party. And we've seen things like Trump helped unseat Republican state lawmakers in Indiana, who he blamed for foiling his redistricting push there last year. And just this last weekend, he took credit for the primary defeat of Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy, who's been on Trump's bad side ever since voting to convict the president in 2021 at his impeachment trial. In fact, Trump actually personally recruited and backed Cassidy's main challenger, Congresswoman Julia Letlow, who won about 45% of the vote. Though also, that only tells part of the story because notably another candidate, a former Trump administration official who also campaigned on loyalty to the president, they also finished ahead of Cassidy with around 28% of the vote. So one, Cassidy's hopes for re-election just shattered and it was an embarrassing defeat. And two, since neither won an outright majority, the two top finishers now have to advance to a runoff. But as far as Cassidy's defeat, you had Trump celebrating on social media saying, Cassidy's disloyalty to the man who got him elected is now a part of legend, and it's nice to see that his political career is over. Without a doubt, even just based on his most recent post, Thomas Massie is kind of the next domino in Donald Trump's eyes. In his latest of many posts insulting Massie, you had Trump describing him as the worst congressman in the long and storied history of the Republican Party. He called him an obstructionist and a fool. And that coming less than a day from a separate post calling him a weak and pathetic rhino and a totally ineffective loser. But then also in that post, you had Trump praising Massie's challenger, a guy by the name of Ed Galrine. He's a former Navy SEAL. He's a 5th-generation farmer who had only run for public office once before, losing to a guy by the name of Aaron Reed, who actually is also a former Navy SEAL as well as a gun store owner and was actually Trump's first choice to run against Massie, but Reed decided against it. Right? And while he also vowed to stay neutral out of respect, he has not stayed silent. Saying about Galrine in one interview, he has the personality of a rock, saying, I don't think anybody's going to vote for Ed Galrine. They'll either vote for Massie or against Massie. And that's actually an assessment that was shared by Massie himself, who told NBC News this week, people aren't going to be voting for me or voting for him on election day. They're going to be voting for me or voting against me. That actually might be an opinion that Trump shares because he previously suggested that all he needed to run against Massie was someone with a pulse. So Trump's also said that with Ed, he got more.
And I got somebody with a warm body, but a big, beautiful brain and a great patriot. He's unbelievable.
Really, Galrine's most important qualification, at least in Trump's view, is his just unflinching loyalty. Well, you have Massie, arguing that this is a negative, claiming, his opponent would be little more than a yes man to the president. Galrine's pushed back on that idea, saying, I guess I should have gotten 5 Bronze Stars to demonstrate my personal courage and independence to act on my own. I am no rubber stamp, will never happen. But also, notably, he refused to even participate in a debate against Massie, and he skipped county events where both candidates were invited to speak. He also proudly said at one of his most recent campaign stops that he is 100% behind the president and what he is doing to turn our nation around. And he's really presented himself as being a quote-unquote team player, saying, I'm going to go to Speaker Johnson and the president and JD, I'm going to say, where do you need me, coach? But also, what's really wild is, while Galrine, he very much looks like a yes man, Massie is not a no man. If you actually look at his record, he votes with Trump and the Republican Party most of the time. It's just that he's broken ranks on some of the issues that Trump seems to care about most. And this goes back to actually before Epstein. It goes back to Trump's first term when Massie blocked the passage of a COVID relief bill during the pandemic. And that led to Trump calling for Massie to be thrown out of the Republican Party. In the relationship, it's just gotten worse. First up in this new term, he had Massie being one of the only 2 House Republicans to vote against Trump's so-called big, beautiful bill. He then also led the charge alongside Democrat Ro Khanna to secure the passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act, which is an issue he's continued to speak out about. And that one he's described as the final straw for Trump, which is also a view that seems to be shared by the likes of former Republican Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who resigned after facing the wrath of Trump herself. You had her writing on Twitter just yesterday, there were only 4 of us, Republicans, that signed the discharge petition to force the vote to release the Epstein files. Thomas Massie, Nancy Mace, Lauren Boebert, and myself. Trump has come after us one by one ever since then. But they're also accusing other Republican members of Congress of being absurdly obedient to the president, who she said was doing everything in his reign of of terror to hold them back. And adding, wars are being waged, the markets are being manipulated, and the average American is being driven further into ruin while the Epstein class reigns and has yet to face any accountability. And actually, on the subject of wars being waged, Massie's response to the US-Israel war against Iran, it has not done him any favors when it comes to Trump's opinion. Right? And that's because Massie has sided repeatedly with Democrats in votes to end the war, with him also condemning aid to Israel as a misuse of taxpayer money and spoken out against the influence of the pro-Israel lobby in American politics, including in his own race. Right? Because like I said at the beginning, this has reportedly been the most expensive House primary in history, at least in terms of ad spending, with more than $32 million going toward ads against Massie. Roughly $9 million of that came from AIPAC and other pro-Israel interest groups, and around $7 million came from prominent pro-Israel donors via a super PAC launched by Trump allies last June, specifically to unseat Massie. And then connected to that, just last week, Massie announced a bill that attempts to force AIPAC to register under the Foreign Agents Registration Act, telling reporters that he thinks that his race has become a referendum on whether Israel gets to buy seats in Congress, while also telling Politico recently, "My opponent wouldn't even be out of the starting blocks if it weren't for that money." In this aspect of Massie's politics, it has been especially appealing to some former Trump diehards who have increasingly come out against him in what's been described as this MAGA civil war. And so that includes a lot of people we've covered on this show recently, like not only MTG, but people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. And earlier this month, Massie actually appeared on Carlson's show and claimed that at that point, more than $10 million had been spent to take him down.
It didn't come from regular people. It's come from billionaires, and 95% of it, at least 95%, has come from the Israeli lobby. The real reason that this race is a serious race and I may lose is because a foreign lobby has fully funded to the extent that they've never done in any Republican race ever before. My opponent.
You then also saw things like Candace Owens reacting to that clip and announcing that she had endorsed Massie.
Thomas Massie, who has for a very long time been my favorite congressman because he consistently votes against sending our money overseas, and he cannot be bought by AIPAC. He declines that sort of bribery from Israel. And so what do they want? They want him unseated. There's no question at all that our government is occupied, that Trump's administration is completely occupied, and they are not serving the American people.
Also, I'll say, in just kind of the past few days, there's actually been a clip of Carlson that's been going around on social media that maybe you've seen. It's been shared by similarly controversial figures like Alex Jones and Jackson Hinkle, but also there's a version that appears to have somehow gotten picked up and shared by a Russian state-controlled media outlet. And while the original is actually from a couple of months ago, right, a few days before the US and Israel attacked Iran, you have a lot of people saying it still stands out now. Or because you had Carlson claiming that Israel had to act then because there were only going to be more Thomas Massies in the US in the future.
The only reason we're having this war is because Israel wants it. This is their last chance, they believe. This presidency is the last presidency where they're going to have unequivocal bipartisan support. Period. You can't primary every Thomas Massie, and there's a whole army of them coming at some point because everyone can see what's going on.
And you know, whatever you think about Carlson and a lot of the people that are connected to this with their conspiracy theories or concerns about their credibility, we're at the same time seeing people who do not like them saying, hey, there is some truth to what's being said here. People pointing to the fact that Israel's popularity is declining in the US, more politicians are speaking out, and Netanyahu has said that he wants to draw down Israel's reliance on American military support, seeming to tie that decision to declining support for his country. Though notably, he attributed that to manipulated social media rather than what many people and experts say are crimes that have been committed in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. But with all that said, right, bringing it back to Massie, while there may be more Massies in the future, it is not clear that the actual one's going to be able to win his own race. The available polling, it's not all that reliable, but what is out there suggests that a win or a loss is a very real possibility. Though I will say, as far as the prediction markets, those are betting against it. And Massie, for his part, he's argued that the outcome's going to come down to turnout, especially whether younger people come out and vote. And as all that's playing out, you had his fellow lawmaker, Senator Lindsey Graham, a supporter of the war in Iran, arguing that Massie, like Bill Cassidy, he's only going to get what's coming to him for not always siding with Trump.
Bill Cassidy's lost because he tried to destroy Trump. Massie's going to lose because he's trying to destroy the agenda. You can disagree with President Trump, but if you try to destroy him, you're going to lose because this is the party of Donald Trump.
And Graham appeared to try to argue that Republicans could disagree with Trump, but he just kind of seemed to suggest it couldn't be in any meaningful way. And that does seem to be the majority view in the Republican Party right now. And of course, all of this, it's only one part of the story. Right? This is primary season, but there are going to be a number of competitive races in the general. While it's not going to be this specific district, they are out there and they matter. And so the question, especially come November, will be, will these especially younger Republicans that do not align with the president on things like the Epstein files, the Iran war, and things like that, do they punish Trump and the Republican Party for all of that, as well as pushing out voices like Massie's? Because many of Massie's supporters see his supposed crimes as being someone who wants the Epstein files released and doesn't want a war of choice with Iran. Many arguing that he appears to be embodying the actual ideals of some sort of America First thing rather than whatever Trump's doing. But hey, time will tell, and regarding the primary, it'll tell pretty soon. So in the meantime, of course, I'd love to know your thoughts, opinions, and reactions, but also maybe your predictions. What do you think is going to go down at the primary? I am personally a begrudging cynic. I think that Massie is going to get voted out. But again, where the polling is, where the margin of error is, anything could happen. And then there's more we've got to dive into in just a minute. But first, let me thank a sponsor and say, it seems like modern healthcare somehow expects you to become a part-time administrative assistant the second you need a doctor. Insurance, referrals, availability, reviews. At some point, you're not even seeking medical care anymore. You're assembling a fantasy roster. But it also doesn't have to be that annoying. Not with today's sponsor, Zocdoc. You see, Zocdoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can find someone that you love. We're talking more than 150,000 providers across all 50 states, covering over 200 specialties. You can search by specialty or symptom, whether you need dermatology, dentistry, primary care, eye care, or something else entirely. You can also filter by insurance, location, and whether you want an in-person visit or a video appointment. Plus, you can read verified patient reviews so you're not just blindly rolling the dice on who you're seeing. And I especially appreciate that you can see real-time availability and book instantly. No phone tag, no waiting around. And appointments happen fast, typically within 24 to 72 hours with same-day appointments sometimes available. I mean, seriously, I've used Zocdoc and it makes the whole process way less painful. So stop putting off those doctor's appointments and scan that QR code or go to Zocdoc.com/Phil to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/Phil. This message is sponsored by Zocdoc. But then, diving right back into the news, Ebola is apparently back, and it's already in the United States. There are 350 suspected cases globally, 91 suspected deaths as of recording, no vaccines, and officials say that the outbreak is bigger than we even think. And so right now, you have the World Health Organization declaring an Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda as a global health emergency. And as far as in the US, reports say that at least 6 people have been exposed to the virus. One of those is confirmed, and 3 others are said to have high-risk contact or exposure. And diving into the specifics, the suspected cases and deaths that we've seen so far are linked to an Ebola strain called Bundy Bugyu. It first popped up in a 2007 outbreak, infecting 149 people, killing 37. The next time we then saw it was in 2012, when it infected 57 and killed 29. And so this appears to only be the 3rd time that we're dealing with this rare strain, and we're looking at a fatality rate of around 30 to 50%. And on top of that, it appears you can have the virus for weeks before you start showing symptoms. And while you aren't usually contagious up until that point, the early symptoms like fatigue or fever, they're easy to write off as something else. And so there are concerns that a lot of damage could be done to spread it before you realize what it is. And so that ends up being one of the reasons why officials say that the numbers that we've seen so far, they might not even tell the full story. And the timing here, it could be better is one way I'd put it. Global health agencies are still recovering from COVID. Funding battles could backfire on us here in the United States. And all of that is trust in public health institutions is deeply fractured. But now officials have put a level 4 travel advisory in place for the DRC and Uganda while they try to get Americans there to safe quarantine locations. One source even said that they could be moving to a US military base in Germany, but that hasn't been confirmed yet. Right, and while the CDC wouldn't answer any direct questions about the patient with symptoms that reports have mentioned, they said that the overall risk for Americans was low, with them stressing that they did not expect this to be some second coming of some pandemic. But still, you have some scientists worried that even if the immediate risk is low, the bigger concern is just how weak the US's response systems have become. Or for this or something else, I mean, since last year, the US has backed out of the World Health Organization, cut funding from the US Agency for International Development, right, USAID, and cut a lot of funding for the CDC. You also had Elon Musk and his Doge bros accidentally cutting 4 out of 5 USAID contracts related to Ebola. And while he said that his team corrected that immediately with no interruption, when it was all said and done, 1.6 out of the $2.2 million set aside for Ebola prevention, it was cut. And even back then, you had officials concerned, saying that it was going to have an impact on the groups meant to prepare us for moments like this.
As the WHO has tried to address this, 2 important phenomena have happened. One is they've had to downsize considerably, meaning that there are less resources available to support countries around the world with technical assistance. There's less resources for data monitoring for potential threats such as pandemics, emerging disease threats. There's less resources for helping to support supply chains. All of those direct impacts of the financial consequences of our withdrawal are real.
Or to put it in other words, with these cuts, we just don't have the people or the resources in place to track, predict, prevent, or manage these types of outbreaks for ourselves or the countries that we used to help. And we also know that because this is not the first time since we've made those cuts that things have gotten sketchy. Or when another Ebola outbreak hit Uganda in early 2025 without US support, the president of the Uganda Medical Association said they were notably less prepared and responsive. They didn't even have the money to get enough protective gear for the medical workers trying to save lives, which meant that a lot of them just had to bow out of helping for their own safety. So with that, you had him saying with no USAID money and CDC expertise, it was like Uganda was left to die. And again, you have to look at the bigger picture here because Uganda is just one example. The Ebola outbreak is just one virus. Even with other recent outbreaks like the ongoing hantavirus situation, there is a growing concern that health systems are being tested on multiple fronts at once. And depending on where in the world these diseases and viruses hit, that could leave millions of people defenseless.
As countries no longer have access to support their health systems, we are starting to see them disintegrate. We are seeing those impacts in very real terms right now. There's an estimated over 750,000 excess deaths that will occur this year because of these changes, most of those in children.
And so we have yet another preventable virus spreading because the people in charge of the systems designed to catch it were kicked out of their offices. It's why you had one expert saying it is really unusual for an Ebola outbreak to get to this scale before being detected, particularly in DRC, which is a lot of Ebola experience. But without the resources to put that expertise to use, now the whole world has to be put on notice, and none of this had to happen. From last year's outbreak to what we're seeing now, the people who have died, their lives could have been saved if the US kept supporting the agencies that were doing the work. And what I'll add to this is something that I'm worried about with like all these situations is that if a few of these things, they spread and you see it pop up in the news, there's a lot of concern, but then it kind of fizzles out, you may end up lulling a big part of the population into kind of a sense of complacency of, oh, well, we're probably fine enough. When something eventually comes around that's like that first wave of COVID and we're just not prepared, that it's gonna fucking crush us. And even that might be skipping the step of being worried about what we're seeing now and looking more towards the future already, like maybe a little bit too early, I don't know. But hey, time will tell, and of course, every death we see in the meantime, it's another example of you may not fuck with politics, but politics will fuck with you. Right, but then next up from that, let's kind of condense this. There's more news you need to know today that I want to get in today's show, starting with this situation in Austin where 3 people were arrested after a 2-day shooting and crime spree. Right, between Saturday night and Sunday morning, Austin saw a spree of vehicle thefts, gun thefts, and at least 12 shootings. Well, luckily no one died. At least 4 people were injured, including one who's in serious but stable condition at a local trauma center. The whole situation even triggered a shelter-in-place order for South Austin until police caught up with the people responsible. People who turned out to be a group of teenagers, with 2 of them showing up on camera at several points during the spree and another joining the party at some point. So police, they were able to track them down and catch them in a traffic stop where all 3 took off running. The 15 and the 17-year-old, they were caught and taken to a juvenile detention center, while the third, a 16-year-old, was on the run until getting caught late last night. And according to the local police, these kids allegedly stole multiple vehicles. They fired shots at apartment complexes, homes, pedestrians, and even 2 fire stations. And right now, there's no clear reason why they decided to LARP Grand Theft Auto this weekend. With Austin Police Chief Lisa Davis saying,
I don't know what motive would drive anybody to come and drive around senselessly in this city and in multiple parts of the city shooting.
But what we do know is that this is kind of not out of nowhere. The 17-year-old already had a warrant out for theft from the same gun store that the 15-year-old allegedly stole from this weekend. For whatever reason, it left the community in South Austin pretty rattled. And actually, speaking of rattled, we then jump into the world of business and finance where you have investors sweating over this bond yield creep. Because over the last week, we've seen a sharp increase in bond yields around the world. We're talking 10-year US Treasury yields trading at nearly their highest level since early last year, yields in the UK long bond at a 28-year high, and Japan's 30-year borrowing costs were pushed over 4%. And if you have no idea what the hell I just said, the translation is investors around the world are simultaneously getting nervous. Right? It looks like it's reflecting the very serious concerns regarding the impact that energy costs are going to have on the global economy. And of course, we have the war in Iran to thank for that. That's why you have Sam Stovall, the chief investment strategist at CFRA, saying, like a domino effect, the continued closure of the Strait of Hormuz will keep upward pressure on oil prices, which will likely continue to push inflation readings higher and cause bond yields to rise. And saying this combination will reduce consumer and investor confidence and may trigger a digestion of recent stock price gains. And again, to translate, the recent gains in the stock market could kind of just disappear if there is not a permanent solution to the war in Iran fast. So with that, you've got people like Jack Ablin, the chief market strategist at Crescent Capital, saying that even a couple of month delay in reopening the Strait of Hormuz to both oil and natural gas tankers, it could lead to, quote, a brand new inflation regime for which investors just aren't prepared. But also, if the stock market gets hit, then maybe the 10% that are actually like benefiting from the economy right now, unlike the 90% that are just having to try and tough it out in life and pay all the increased costs, then maybe they'll care. Then you've got the Trump administration just turning 3 of Trump's lawsuits against the federal government into a $1.3 $1.776 billion taxpayer-funded fund, with the DOJ announcing today that 3 Trump lawsuits have been settled all at once. The first was over the leaked tax returns from his first term, the second was over the 2022 Mar-a-Lago raid, and the third was over the Russia investigation. And so in exchange, the DOJ created what they are officially calling the Anti-Weaponization Fund. And Trump's DOJ says that that dollar amount of $1.776 billion, 1776, was based on the projected valuation of future claimants' claims, which is really more government speak for they picked a patriotic number and made the math work backwards. And they're saying that Trump himself received no money under the deal, just a formal apology, and that the actual money goes to a 5-member commission appointed by his attorney general, and Trump can personally remove any member. The money can reportedly flow to nearly 1,600 January 6 defendants that Trump already pardoned. And the fund has until December 15, 2028, 1 month before Trump leaves office, to hand out the money. The settlement being signed by acting attorney general Todd Blanche, who was also a member of Trump's personal criminal defense team before joining the DOJ. And something that led to this is you had a federal judge asking whether Trump and the agencies that he runs were even sufficiently adverse for these lawsuits to be valid. 6 court-appointed attorneys concluded that the case raises the specter that the defendants are operating at the president's direction. And Trump's lawyers, they settled 2 days before that ruling was due. And so in a way, Trump sued himself 3 times. His own former lawyer settled it. Taxpayers appear to be paying. His hand-picked commission decides who collects, and the money can flow to January 6 rioters. Which is why you have many saying it's being sold as fixing weaponization, but it appears to be weaponization. And then finally, you had Elon Musk getting demolished in federal court today. A unanimous jury in Oakland just rejected his entire lawsuit against OpenAI and his former best friend, Sam Altman. While the trial, it took 3 weeks, the jury deliberated for only 90 minutes. Because in 2015, Musk co-founded OpenAI as a nonprofit. He put in $38 million, and by 2018, he tried to take control. The other founders, they said no, he quit, and in 2023, he launched his own AI company, XAI. And in 2024, Musk sued, claiming that Altman and co-founder Greg Brockman, quote, stole a charity by spinning up a for-profit arm. But the jury's apparent reasoning for throwing this out is that Musk just waited too long. He had 3 years to file, he sued 5 years after OpenAI went for profit, and a year after launching his own competing AI company. Something that OpenAI's lead attorney called out in his opening statement, saying it's too late now to gin up something to harm a competitor. Not only did the jury agree in 90 minutes, the judge, Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers, said after the verdict that she was prepared to dismiss Musk's claims on the spot without even waiting for the jury. And so while Musk, he wanted $134 billion in Altman's job, he got none of that, and in fact, the lawyers for OpenAI and Microsoft were seen hugging on their way out. Well, this is breaking as I'm recording it. I'm sure Elon Musk is gonna respond to this in a completely normal and calm way. But then from that, we kind of set up for the end of today's show, which is a quick congratulations and the final block of news. So first up, congratulations to Daniel G, SeatGeek's latest weekly winner, who just scored $500 in tickets. And for the rest of y'all, that's right, SeatGeek is still giving away $500 in tickets, and you should definitely enter today if you haven't already. You could be the next winner and snag $500 towards seeing your favorite artist, sporting event, or play. There's like over 70,000 events to choose from. And all you gotta do is just add code DeFranco to your SeatGeek app profile for a chance at the weekly $500 prize, no purchase necessary. But with that said, then the final thing that I want to talk about today is a piece of news that ends up kind of being a palate cleanser. Because there is a 73-year-old volunteer cuddler who's been helping babies at the NICU at the Children's Hospital of Richmond at VCU for the last 8 years. With him saying that it's the best gig he's ever had. It just feels right. And yeah, it just might be the most adorable post-retirement job in existence. Because while Dave Whitlow, he spent over 40 years working as a local government manager, he shows up every Tuesday and Thursday, puts on his uniform of a hospital gown and gloves, leaves his phone outside of the unit, and gets to just cuddle babies who sometimes weigh less than 2 pounds. And as far as specifics, he says he gets to hold around 5 babies every time he comes, and he gets up to 8 on a good day. But also, he's very clear that when he is in there, he means business.
I watch the monitors first to see whether positionally there's anything to do to improve, but he looks pretty good. His SATs are at 100%. So that's what we're looking for.
And then from there, he turns to the nurses.
I asked the nurse, tell me what this child is receiving, what kind of treatment, is there anything special I need to know about it?
And while, he now has years of experience under his belt, he's a professional, he says, it did take some getting used to at first.
I was scared to death. We have 2 children, they're grown now. And I could hold babies.
But you haven't held a baby in so long.
Haven't held a baby in a long time.
With all this, he talked about how, the more comfortable he's gotten with it, the more it's become more than just clinical work for him.
The support and spiritual needs of the family and the staff. And so it all kind of gets tied together here.
And with that, he said that, his message when he leaves these newborns is to grow strong, grow smart, grow kind. And honestly, I feel like with the world as it is today, when I first read that line, it almost brought a tear to my eye. That's how much I needed just a breath of fresh air as far as news coverage. But then also, as if all of this was not heartwarming enough, when you ask him why he does it, it gets even better.
I guess it's important to me to think that this is what I want from people in general.
Connections, caring about people, caring about the future. You love to see it. But that, my friend, brings us to the end of your Monday Philip DeFranco Show dive into the news. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking. Thank you for sharing the video to someone that normally just doom scrolls, and hopefully they can just have this little dose of poison so they're connected, but also not overwhelmed. But hey, no matter what you do, let me just say, I love yo face, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.